Okay, tonight, a few words about the entire situation in Tripoli. Okay, so as is or as can be expected from the mainstream media in the West, everyone is jumping on the bandwagon, says hooray, hooray, the rebels have taken Tripoli over and they're in control and the Gaddafi regime is going to fall. Well, first off, I'd like to remind everyone that we don't know what's going on there, okay? The reporters who are there are staying in hotels for the most part. They're not really going out in the field too much. And there's a lot of speculation flying around. And of course, also, this instant critique of this Gaddafi regime, which evidently, it sounds like they went against their own people, killing them by the hundreds of thousands or something, which is an absolute lie. And, in the West, the Western developed nations wouldn't be even concerned about that nation if it didn't have natural resources that we're after, namely oil. It's not like China is also not playing games there. They are, don't get me wrong. But, I find it quite curious that this rebel leadership immediately was able to set up banks supported by all these other nations, So rest assured, these are not altruistic motives, I might add. And, to demonize Gaddafi to the degree that he has been is probably not a good conclusion. Because for one thing, Libya was a very, very poor country. And the guy, sure, of course, the government is corrupt and it is dictatorial in a way, because it's kind of like a family clan thing, and the wealth gets passed down the line and so on. But this is not somebody who just took the country's natural resources for his own family and for himself, like many other Western-supported dictators, I might add. No, he actually went about to bring, running water to most of the country, to get electricity into towns, and to set up a social infrastructure, which, from what I hear or heard in the past up until now, most people in Libya were fine with, So, and of course, I'm speculating here too, in the sense that I don't live there. I don't know. Personally, don't know any Libyans, for one thing. But anytime you hear anything coming from the mainstream media about, these evil dictators who all of a sudden fall out of favor, like Mubarak, and we supported the Mubarak regime for basically decades, okay? And now, of course, since these revolutions are going on in the rest of the Arab world, we had to distance ourselves from that politically, because, what we're going to have to do now is undermine these uprisings and, funnel them into our own interest sphere, so to speak. And that's exactly what I think is going on, and even to a much higher degree in Libya. It's no accident that this new rebel leader, was part of the Gaddafi government, but studied economics and economics and political science in the United States at a university in the United States, in Pittsburgh, in fact. And his whole thing was about free markets in Libya, and about privatization. And that clashed with the beliefs of the Gaddafi regime, which, was in the socialist camp. And they said, no, we don't want to go all private. We want to keep our own resources. No thanks, So no wonder no wonder that the uh, corrupt leadership, I might add, in the West, just basically loves the rebel leaders now, And as far as what's going on in the ground, in Tripoli, it was very curious because all these stories are coming out. Rebels have control of Tripoli and all this stuff, right? Then I came across a little blip of an article online. Today, by the way, is August the 22nd, okay? August the 22nd. And I came across an online article dated August the 23rd, and this is way before the midnight deadline in New York City, okay, by the New York Times, saying that, oh, well, the rebel victory may not seem what it is. So once again, this is all about jumping to quick conclusions. It's about sensationalism and, applause for what basically the Western elites imagined what would happen. And while things on the ground may look completely different. Completely different. Then, curiously enough, on Google, and if you think that this is just an algorithm at this point, I can probably advise you not to believe that anymore. All of a sudden, these articles come up from some outlet called the Tripoli Post. Okay, now the Tripoli Post came out with this article saying that the rebel leaders the rebel government confirms the arrest of Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam. And then it just has a one paragraph line that the rebel leader confirmed the arrest of this guy, whatever, okay? Then it goes on with readers' comments, okay, on this website, and they're all pro-Western, and of course it's all written in the Western language as well, that alone should give you a clue. Now, unfortunately, I can't read their language, but it's telling. And so I want to jump right into some of these comments, which are probably nothing more than propaganda and pro-free market, pro-Western privatization propaganda. And here it goes. This is a comment, okay? Comment: can you guess why Gaddafi's regime ruled Libya by deception for 42 years? And can you guess why Libya and the Libyans singled out and have become scapegoats and targets for the entire crooks and stalkers of the world? Now, first off, you can tell this is not an English speaker here who's writing this. But let's go on. To respond to these questions, it is easy to put the blame on others or on someone in particular, but the reality in this disunited and unaware awareness of the poor Libyans themselves. They have been singled out, stalked, and ripped off of their limited resources, time, and people for the following reasons. As I say, I'm just reading a comment from this paper. And the idiot Gaddafi's regime has divided the country and used the poor Libyans against each other to dominate and to remain a ruler for life, and then pass on what is left to his relatives. Okay, I beg to differ, because he actually his regime built the basic infrastructure in that country. There wouldn't be any running water in any Libyan town without that guy, okay? As much as you may think he's eccentric or nuts or whatever, that's what his regime did. The lack of Point two, the lack of genuine democracy, rule of law, and unity, which created a chaotic and corrupt, miserable, opportune environment that is susceptible to sinister dealings. Now, wait a minute, okay? The United States, or basically the Western leadership, is criticizing that country for the lack of genuine democracy. We're in no position to rule, to even critique anybody on that point anymore, because genuine democracy and the rule of law is most certainly not being followed here in the United States. Point three, the hijacking of Libya and the Libyans by the opportune crooks of the multinationals, especially by the developing nations, not the developed nations, the developing nations, for their own interests and quick become wealthy gains. So in other words, the Libyan regime under Gaddafi never had any dealings with the corrupt elites in the West. No, well, there's some truth to that because it was curtailed after the Lockerbie thing. But rest assured, he's had plenty of dealings with the West. And it isn't the developing nations which are robbing the resources of that country. It's exactly the opposite. It is the developed nations who are after the resources. Point four, the unhealthy environments that have been created and orchestrated between the Western world and the Libyans for the gains of the developing nations. Lack of quality education and continuous skills building for Libyans. Guess what, Actually, education in Libya, from what I've heard, is free. It doesn't cost you any money. As far as the quality goes, it's probably a step up from the religious madrasas in Pakistan. Because people in Libya, when they go to school, probably just don't memorize the Quran. They learn about other things. The lack of quality governments and management of limited human, economic, and natural resources. I mean, what kind of a sentence is this? The lack of merit-based recruitment of foreign employees, exchanges, and monkey-like business dealings. I mean, this is so vague, it's laughable, okay? Vague. A lack of a well-managed cross-cultural movement of people and resources into and from Libya. Well, what that means basically is that Libya, under Gaddafi, basically had some say-so over their own resources, okay? And they weren't just going to have the multinationals, the Western big multinationals come in there and get everything, So, the lack of adequate border control, okay, as if the West is concerned with the border control of Libya, and management to minimize illegal smuggling of drugs, people, and other products and services. And now, isn't this exactly what is going on in Afghanistan right now? And this has been going on, for under the Russians and under the Americans now for decades. The lack of effective leadership, civil societies, and corporates to protect the people from scams, rip-offs, and abuse the poor. Oh, I see. Now, corporations are going to solve everything in Libya, right? And they're going to care for the poor. And they're not corrupt in any way, shape, or form whatsoever. And wait till you hear this guy's solution to this. Short term. Get rid of the regime as soon as possible and bring them to justice to the face of the rule of law, national and internationally. Not to mention the fact that the United States actually does not recognize the International Tribunal in The Hague. Establish and maintain law and order through awareness seminars, education, communication, and discipline. I can just imagine what kind of discipline would be required there, You're dealing with people who live in a simpler society, not, in some consumer gluttony like most of us in the West. And, I'm guilty of this as well. But I'm just saying, I recognize that fact. But, how you're going to bring tribal people and people in the city all over Libya together and hold educational seminars? Unite people to work together peacefully, communicate effectively, and help each other out. This is another one of these vague, screwed up sentences. How easy it is to say that rather than to accomplish it. On merit, exchange, deal, and partner with the best cultures of the most civilized societies and nations who stood behind the Libyans in their collapsing and challenging times for both sides to benefit in all fields. Yeah, looks kind of one-sided to me. And the arrogance exhibited in this comment to say, basically, that the best cultures and the most civilized cultures are actually to be found only in the Western world is absolutely preposterous. The Western world is so civilized and so cultured that they instigated 2 world wars with millions of people dead as a result, dropped 2 atomic bombs on people, and then we are, I guess, the heart of humanity. I mean, you need to be careful when you're reading this kind of shit online because, the internet used to be a pretty good source of information when it was somewhat, let's say, more, when it was less controlled. Now we see, the corporate media jumping right in. Most of it that you see on here is no longer genuine. It doesn't, come from real people. It comes from the elites as usual. And so, as long as YouTube, I guess, still exists, you can, to some degree, you can still find both on YouTube, but I don't think for much longer, YouTube and Facebook, it's all going to be used for social control, advertising, all the rest of it, just like television and newspapers were in their day. And the main thing is people need to learn how to read between the lines and to educate themselves as to which sources have any credibility at all. And, most people simply don't have that time. They're working 2 jobs. They're not going to, stay online for, 4 or 5 hours a night researching something like this, for instance. They don't have the time. They're too tired when they come home from work. And then with this whole thing, basically the distrust in our own government and institutions, all the confusion out there. I mean, I wish I knew what to do about it, but I certainly don't. I can, to some degree, see what's happening, and I fall prey to it at times. Well, I shouldn't just say at times, you know. I'm drinking coffee here, so yeah, that's a consumer product. And simply being aware of it is not enough to change things. I guess things in this country will have to simply get bad enough for the majority of people, not just 20% of them, before, you know, some sort of explosion happens. And I guess that's my commentary for tonight. Thanks to my regular viewers for still listening to my little rants, and thanks to some of my new subscribers. I really don't know who you are. I don't keep track of most stuff that you know, that happens on my channel page. So not much else to say, I guess.